The morning mist clung to the ancient stones like memories refusing to fade. Kira moved through the ruins with practiced silence, her bare feet finding purchase on moss-slicked marble that had once gleamed under ceremonial torches. The Nyreen temple had been magnificent, once spiraling towers that caught starlight, gardens that bloomed with flowers that sang at dawn. Now only she remained to tend what little beauty survived. Her hands, marked with the ritual scars of exile, worked carefully among the surviving moonflowers. Each pale blossom required precise care, their roots drinking from the sacred springs that still bubbled beneath the broken stones. The scars on her palms, 3 parallel lines on each hand, had been carved there 15 years ago, when her own people declared her too dangerous to remain among them. Too human-hearted, they'd said, too willing to show mercy to those who feared them. The irony wasn't lost on her. Exiled for being too human, she now lived in solitude while humans in the nearby villages whispered tales of the cursed one who dwelt among the ruins. Children dared each other to glimpse her from afar. Merchants took longer routes to avoid the temple road. Even her own people, the few Nyreen who still walked the world, gave her sanctuary a wide berth. She was lost in the rhythm of tending when the sound of footsteps on gravel made her freeze. Heavy boots, not the soft tread of her people. Human. Her scarred hands stilled on the flower stems as she listened. The footsteps paused, then continued with more caution. Whoever approached had spotted the temple and was still coming. Kira rose slowly, her tall frame unfolding like a dark flower. At nearly 7 feet, she towered over most humans, her skin the deep blue-black of midnight skies, marked with the silver patterns that showed her lineage. Her hair, white as moonlight, fell in intricate braids adorned with small bones and stones. Style that spoke of exile rather than honor. The human who emerged from the tree line was not what she expected. Most who came seeking the temple arrived in groups, armed with iron weapons and righteous fury. This one came alone, carrying only a worn leather satchel and what appeared to be surveying equipment. He was young, perhaps 30 human years, with sun-darkened skin and intelligent brown eyes that widened when they found her among the flowers. "Forgive me," he said, his voice carrying the slight tremor of surprise rather than terror. "I didn't expect to find anyone here." Kara studied him carefully. No weapon drawn. No protective charms or iron jewelry. His clothes were practical, but well made, suggesting education rather than superstition. Still, she kept her distance. "The temple has been abandoned for decades," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality of her people. "What brings you to seek dead stones?" The human man, she corrected herself, noting the careful way he moved. The respectful distance he maintained adjusted his satchel nervously. "I'm a researcher. Thane Aldrich, from the University of Millhaven. I study ancient languages, and I've heard there might be intact texts here. Nyreen script is, well, it's incredibly rare. Most humans prefer to keep it that way." The bitterness in her voice made him flinch, but he didn't retreat. "I'm not most humans," Thane said simply. "I believe knowledge belongs to everyone, regardless of who first wrote it down. The Nyreen were master scholars before." He caught himself, color rising in his cheeks. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to presume or give offense." Before the purges, he'd been about to say. Before humans had decided her people were too dangerous to coexist with. The fact that he'd stopped himself, that he showed awareness of the wound. Those words might open, surprised her more than his presence. "There are texts," she admitted slowly, "in the inner sanctum, but they're written in High Nyreen, not the common script your people usually encounter. You can read High Nyreen?" His eyes lit with genuine excitement, and for a moment he forgot to maintain his careful distance. "I mean, of course you can, but would you be willing to help me understand them? I can pay for your time or trade supplies, or you would work with me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, revealing more vulnerability than she'd intended. Knowing what I am? Thane tilted his head, studying her with those keen brown eyes. You're Nyreen. You're tending a garden in the ruins of your people's sacred place. You've been nothing but courteous since I arrived uninvited. He paused, then added quietly, What exactly am I supposed to be afraid of? The question hung in the morning air, like mist, impossible to grasp. Kira had grown so accustomed to fear her own people's fear that she would bring humans down upon them. Humans' fear that she would curse or corrupt them, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen as simply herself. The villagers say, I curse minds, she said, testing him. That my touch brings madness. The villagers say a lot of things, Thane replied with a slight smile. They also say the old mill is haunted because they hear strange noises at night. Last month, I discovered it was a family of raccoons. He stepped closer, just slightly, his movements slow and deliberate. If you're willing to help me with the texts, I promise to keep an open mind about everything else. An open mind. When? Had anyone last offered her that simple gift? Come back tomorrow, she found herself saying. Bring writing materials. The sanctum is cooler in the morning hours better for the old parchments. As Thane gathered his equipment and prepared to leave, he paused at the edge of the garden. Thank you, he said, for trusting me with this. I know it can't be easy, letting a stranger into your sanctuary. Kira watched him disappear into the forest, her scarred hands unconsciously smoothing her hair, her warm robes. Tomorrow, someone would sit beside her in this sacred space where she'd spent 15 years alone. Someone who looked at her and saw. A person worth speaking with, worth learning from. She tried to remember the last time she'd felt anticipation instead of resignation about the coming dawn. Thane returned with the dawn, as promised. Kira had spent the night cleaning the inner sanctum, a circular chamber where starlight filtered through crystal windows set high in the domed ceiling. Ancient texts lay carefully arranged on a stone table that had once served for ceremonial purposes. Now it would serve scholarship. These are beautiful, Thane breathed as he entered, his voice filled with reverence. His eyes swept over the carved walls where Nyreen script flowed like water, frozen in stone. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. Kira felt a flutter of pride, quickly suppressed. My people were artists as well as scholars. Every letter was carved to please both the eye and the mind. She gestured to the texts. These are genealogies mostly, records of bloodlines and their gifts. Thane approached the table slowly, his excitement barely contained. May I? When she nodded, he bent over the nearest scroll, his brow furrowing. In concentration, I can make out some of the individual characters, but the grammar structure ... is completely different from common script, Kira finished. She moved to stand beside him, close enough that she could point to specific passages. The warmth radiating from his body was startling. She'd forgotten how much heat humans generated. High Nyreen doesn't just record words. It records intent, emotion, the speaker's relationship to what they're describing. Their shoulders brushed as she leaned over to trace a complex symbol with her fingertip. Thane went very still, and she realized he was holding his breath. I'm sorry, she murmured, starting to pull away. I know my people's touch is said to be warm, he said quietly. Your touch is warm. He looked up at her, their faces suddenly mere inches apart. Is that all you've been told about yourself? What you're supposed to be sorry for? The question hit deeper than she'd expected. Among my people, I was too soft. Among humans, I'm too dangerous. I've learned it's easier to assume I should apologize. For existing. Thane's hand moved as if to cover hers, then stopped. May I? He asked softly. The permission he sought was so simple, yet no one had asked it of her in decades. Slowly, she nodded. His fingers settled over hers on the ancient parchment, and she nearly gasped at the contact. His skin was rougher than hers, marked with small scars from his work, warm and undeniably alive. He didn't flinch from her scars, didn't pull away from the alien coolness of her blue-black skin. "Tell me about this passage," he said, his voice slightly rough. "What does it say about bloodlines?" For the next several hours, they worked in comfortable proximity, translating genealogies that spoke of gifts passed through generations. Kira found herself relaxing as Thane proved to be an apt student, his quick mind grasping the nuances of High Nyrene with impressive speed. More surprisingly, he listened to her explanations with genuine interest, occasionally asking questions that showed real insight. "This word keeps appearing," he said, pointing to a recurring symbol. "It's similar to the common Nyrene word for heart, but not quite the same." "Heart song," Kira translated. "It refers to the emotional resonance someone carries. Every Nyrene has a unique heart song. It's how we recognize each other's true nature, beyond appearance or words." "What does yours sound like?" The personal question caught her off guard. It's difficult to describe in human terms. To other Nyrene, it would sound like mourning, perhaps. Loneliness. The song of someone who has lost their place in the harmony. Thane was quiet for a long moment, his fingers still tracing the ancient script. "That's not what I hear when you speak," he said finally. "What do you hear?" He looked up at her, his brown eyes serious. "Intelligence. Gentleness. Someone who tends gardens in ruined places and keeps beauty alive where others see only decay." His fingers brushed hers again, deliberate this time. "Your voice is lovely, Kira. Has anyone ever told you that?" The compliment struck her like lightning. She pulled her hand back, turning away to hide the confusion on her face. "You don't understand. I'm not. I was exiled because I'm flawed. Too weak, too human-hearted to be trusted among my own people." "Maybe," Thane said quietly, "being human-hearted isn't a flaw. Maybe it's exactly what the world needs more of." When she looked back at him, his expression was earnest, without pity or condescension. Just appreciation. As if he truly saw something worthwhile in her, something beyond the scarred exile everyone else perceived. They returned to their work, but the atmosphere had shifted. Every accidental touch sent sparks through her. When he leaned close to examine a passage, she found herself noting the way the light caught in his dark hair, the concentration that creased his brow. When she reached across him for a different scroll, she caught his sharp intake of breath. At her nearness. "This section is about bonding rituals," she said, trying to keep her voice steady as she translated. "The sacred connections between souls, romantic bonds?" Thane asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Among others. Nyrene bonds go deeper than human marriages. They're connections of the heart song itself, when two souls harmonize completely." She paused, remembering fragments of ceremonies she'd witnessed before her exile. "It's said that when true bonds form, both partners become more than they were alone." "That sounds beautiful." "It is, or was. I'll never experience it, of course." The words slipped out before she could stop them, tinged with old grief. "Why not? Who would bond with an exile? Even if another Nyrene could overlook my flaws, I can't leave this place. And humans... She gestured to herself, to her otherworldly appearance, her scars. "Humans fear what they don't understand." Thane was quiet for a long time, studying the text before them. Finally, he said, "I'm human. I'm not afraid of you. You don't know me well enough yet. Then tell me." He turned to face her fully, setting aside the scroll. "Tell me what you think I should be afraid of. Tell me your worst flaws, your deepest charms. Help me understand why you believe you're unworthy of connection. The challenge in his voice was gentle, but unmistakable. Kira found herself meeting his gaze, seeing genuine curiosity there, not the morbid fascination she'd expected. "I feel too." "Much," she said finally. "That's what my people said. I couldn't watch prisoners be executed without weeping. I couldn't turn away beggars, even human ones. I gave aid to a human child, once one who'd been injured fleeing from a Nyrene raid. My people said I was contaminated by human weakness, that I would bring disaster on our settlements." "And that's why they exiled you?" "They said I was dangerous, that my compassion would lead humans back to destroy us all." She laughed bitterly. "They were probably right. I lacked the proper hatred." Thane was quiet for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "You know what I think? I think they were afraid of your strength, not your weakness. It takes more courage to show mercy than to show cruelty. More strength to love than to hate." The words hit her like a physical blow. No one had ever suggested her exile had been their loss, not hers. "Your hands are shaking," Thane observed softly. She looked down, surprised to find he was right. "I'm not used to kindness. It's unsettling, and we'll have to get you used to it." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and covered her trembling hands with his own. "Starting with this, you have beautiful hands, Kira, strong and graceful, made for tending growing things." The compliment sent heat racing through her veins. No one had ever called any part of her beautiful, not even before her exile. She stared down at their joined hands, his warm and human, hers marked with scars and cooled by alien blood. "I should prepare lunch," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Kira," he waited until she looked at him. "Thank you for sharing this with me, for trusting me with your story." As she prepared their simple meal fruits from her garden, bread from her stores, Kira found herself stealing glances at Thane as he continued studying the texts. He approached her people's words with the same careful reverence he'd shown her, and something deep in her chest began to unfurl like a flower turning toward sunlight. When she'd been exiled, she'd believed her life was ending. Now, watching this gentle human scholar bend over her ancestors' wisdom, she wondered if perhaps it was finally beginning. 3 weeks had passed since Thane first arrived at the temple, and their daily routine had settled into something that felt almost like normalcy. Each morning he would arrive with fresh supplies and eager questions. Each evening he would reluctantly pack his materials, always finding one more passage to discuss, one more reason to linger. Kira had begun to anticipate his arrival with something she'd almost forgotten how to feel: joy. She found herself taking extra care with her appearance, braiding her white hair with particular attention, choosing her finest remaining robes. Not that she had many exile, hadn't left her with extensive wardrobes. Today felt different. Storm. Clouds gathered on the horizon, and Thane had arrived earlier than usual, his expression troubled. "The villagers know I've been coming here," he said without preamble as he entered the sanctum. They single quotes read. Concerned. Kira's heart sank. "They want you to stop. They want me to be careful. They've been telling me stories about you. Terrible things. Curses, madness, death following in your wake." He set down his satchel and looked at her directly. "I told them they were wrong. What if they're not?" The question escaped her before she could stop it. "What if there is something dangerous about me? I was exiled for a reason, Thane. What if my people saw something I can't see in myself? Then I'll take that risk." His voice was firm, but she could see the concern in his eyes. "Kira, there's something else. My research grant is almost finished. I'll have to return to the university soon." The words hit her like a physical blow. She'd known this moment would come, but she hadn't prepared for how much it would hurt. "Of course. Your work here is nearly done. My work, maybe, but not." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the storm clouds reflected in his brown eyes. Kira, these past weeks have been the best of my life. Not just because of the research, but because of you. Because of who you are. She turned away, unable to bear the sincerity in his expression. You don't know who I am. You see some romanticized version, the lonely exile, the keeper of ancient wisdom. But I'm just broken, Thane. Flawed enough that my own people couldn't stand to keep me. Look at me. When she didn't turn, his voice grew softer. Please. Against her better judgment, she faced him. He was closer than she'd expected, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. You want to know what I see when I look at you? He asked. I see someone who tends a garden in ruins, because beauty matters, even when no one is there to witness it. I see someone who translates ancient texts with reverence, who handles parchment older than kingdoms with the same care she shows seedlings. I see someone who is cast out for having too much compassion, and who somehow hasn't let that kindness die. His hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull away, and traced the silver patterns that marked her lineage along her cheek. The touch sent electricity through her entire body. I see your scars, he continued, his fingers moving to trace the ritual marks on her palm. These marks they gave you to brand you as different, as wrong. But all I can think when I see them is how much courage it must have taken to endure that pain, and how much strength it takes to carry those marks with dignity. Thane, ... She whispered, but found she had no words for the emotion building in her chest. I see your eyes, he said, his own gaze locked on hers. They're the color of deep water, and they hold so much wisdom, so much sadness, but also hope, even after everything you've endured. His other hand came up to frame her face, thumbs brushing over her cheekbones. The gesture was so tender, it made her tremble. Most of all, he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, I see how beautiful you are. Not just your appearance, though you are stunning in a way that takes my breath away, but your spirit, your mind, your heart. You are the most beautiful person I've ever known, Kira. The word beautiful hit her like lightning. She jerked back. From his touch, her whole body shaking. No, she gasped. No, you can't. That word isn't for me. I'm not. No one has ever. Never? Thane's voice was filled with such gentle outrage that it brought tears to her eyes. No one has ever told you that you're beautiful? She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold together something that felt like it was breaking apart. Beautiful things are cherished, protected. I've been nothing but cast out and feared. If I were beautiful, someone would have. She couldn't finish the sentence. Someone would have what? Loved you? Thane stepped closer again, slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. Kira, the fact that others have been too blind or too afraid to see your worth doesn't make you less worthy. It makes them fools. You don't understand, she said, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I've lived my entire adult life believing I was fundamentally wrong, broken, something to be hidden away. You can't just say one word and expect everything to change. I'm not asking everything to change. Thane's voice was infinitely gentle. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that everyone else has been wrong. She stood frozen as he approached, every instinct telling her to flee, to hide, to protect herself from the inevitable moment when he would see what everyone else saw and pull away in disgust or fear. But he didn't pull away. Instead, he reached out and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. You're beautiful, he said again, as if the repetition could make her believe it. Your strength is beautiful. Your kindness is beautiful. The way you move through your garden, like you're dancing with the flowers, is beautiful. The way you explain ancient texts with such passion that your whole face lights up is beautiful. Thane, please. But even as she protested, something deep inside her was awakening, unfurling like a flower that had been kept in darkness for too long. "The scars on your hands that mark your survival are beautiful," he continued, taking her scarred palms in his hands and pressing gentle kisses to each mark. "The way you've kept hope alive in this place of exile is beautiful. You are beautiful, Kira. And she kissed him. The movement was sudden, desperate, born of 15 years of loneliness and the overwhelming need to silence the voice in her head that insisted this couldn't be real. Their lips met with an intensity that surprised them both, and for a moment the world narrowed to just this, the warmth of his mouth against hers, the solid reality of his arms coming around her, the way he held her as if she were precious rather. Then dangerous dot when they broke apart, both breathing hard, Kira felt something shifting inside her. The temple around them seemed to pulse with energy, as if the ancient stones were responding to emotions too long suppressed. "I can feel it," she whispered against his lips. "Something's changing. Your heart song," Thane said softly. "It's different now, brighter." She could feel it too. The fundamental resonance that defined her was shifting, transforming from the lonely minor key of exile to something richer, more complex. Something that spoke of hope rather than despair. "I've never felt beautiful before," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Then let me show you." His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer. "Let me show you how beautiful you are to me." This time when they kissed, it was slower, deeper, filled with 15 years of longing and the promise of something neither of them had dared hope for. Around them, the crystal windows began to glow with soft light, responding to the power awakening within her, not the destructive force her people had feared, but something generative, creative, born of love rather than anger. When they finally pulled apart, Kira's eyes were bright with unshed tears, but for the first time in decades, they were tears of joy. "Stay," she whispered. "Don't go back to your university. Stay with me." Thane's answer was another kiss, gentle and sure, and in that moment, Kira finally understood what the ancient texts meant when they spoke of souls harmonizing. Her heart song was no longer a lonely melody. It had found its harmony at last. The storm clouds outside began to break apart, letting golden sunlight stream through the crystal windows to bathe them both in light. The temple had become their world. For days after their first kiss, Kira and Thane barely left the sacred grounds, lost in the wonder of discovering each other. The ancient stones seemed to approve of their union flowers, bloomed more vibrantly. The crystal windows cast rainbow light across their intertwined bodies, and the very air hummed with contentment. Kira had never known her body could feel such pleasure, such reverence. Thane worshipped her with hands and lips, tracing every silver pattern on her skin, kissing each scar until she gasped his name like a prayer. In the moonlight filtering through the dome, he would map the constellation of marks across her shoulders, whispering how beautiful she was until she almost believed it. "Here," he would murmur, pressing his lips to the hollow of her throat where her pulse fluttered like a captured bird. "And here." His mouth would find the sensitive spot behind her ear, making her arch against him. "Every part of you is perfect." She learned to touch him in return, marveling at the differences between their bodies, his warm skin, the fascinating texture of the hair on his chest, the way he shuddered when she ran her fingers along his spine. He taught her that intimacy could be gentle, that desire could be expressed through tenderness rather than conquest. Their love-making was a revelation. In the sacred chamber where ancient Nyrene had once performed bonding ceremonies, Kira discovered what it meant to be cherished. Thane's hands on her body were reverent, his kisses both passionate and protective. When he moved within her, it was with a care that brought tears to her eyes, not from pain, but from the overwhelming realization that someone found her worthy of such devotion. "I love you," he whispered against her throat as they moved together, in the ancient rhythm of joining. I love your strength, your gentleness, your beautiful soul. I love you too, she breathed back, the words feeling like a miracle on her tongue. She had never said them before, had never believed she would have cause to. In the aftermath, as they lay tangled together on the soft furs she had gathered, Thane would trace patterns on her skin with his fingertips, and Kira would feel her. Heart song growing stronger, more complex, harmonizing with something she was only beginning to understand, was his own soul's music. The temple approves, she said one morning, watching the way the sunlight danced across the carved walls. I've never seen it respond like this to anyone. Maybe it's been waiting, Thane suggested, his fingers threading through her hair. Waiting for you to find your happiness. But their paradise couldn't last forever. The outside world intruded on their sanctuary like a cold wind. Kira noticed it first in the way the forest sounds changed, birds falling silent, small creatures fleeing. Then came the voices, carried on the wind from the direction of the village. They're coming, she said, pulling away from Thane's embrace. Through the crystal windows, she could see torches moving through the trees, still distant but approaching steadily. Thane rose quickly, reaching for his clothes. How many? Too many. Kira was already dressing, her movements sharp with fear. They finally decided I'm too dangerous to leave alone. Because of me. His voice was heavy with guilt. Because I've been coming here. No, she turned to face him, her expression fierce. Because they're afraid of what they don't understand. Just like my people were. The voices grew closer, and now they could make out individual words. Abomination. Corruption. Unholy union. Kira's hands began to shake as old fears rose up to choke her. I should go, Thane said, buckling his belt. If I meet them before they reach the temple, explain that you've done nothing wrong. They won't listen. Kira caught his arm, her grip desperate. They'll kill you for consorting with me, or worse. They'll say I've cursed you, stolen your mind. Then what do we do? Before she could answer, the first of the villagers emerged from the tree line. Kira counted at least 20, armed with pitchforks, clubs, and blessed iron weapons. At their head walked Father Matthias, the village priest, his face set with righteous fury. Demon! He called out, his voice carrying across the garden. Release the scholar from your foul enchantments. Thane stepped forward, placing himself between Kira and the approaching mob. She's done nothing wrong, he called back. She's helped me with my research, nothing more. Lies, shouted a woman Kira recognized as the baker's wife. We've seen. The lights heard the unholy sounds. You've been corrupted by her evil. The only evil here is your ignorance, Thane replied, his voice steady despite the odds. Kira has shown me nothing but kindness and wisdom. Kira? Father Matthias's voice dripped with disgust. You give the creature a name, as if it were human? It has poisoned your mind completely. Kira felt the familiar despair settling over her like a shroud. This was how it always ended, with fear, with hatred, with her being forced to choose. Between fighting and fleeing. She had thought, perhaps, that with Thane beside her, things might be different. But the mob's fury was too familiar, too absolute. Please, she said, stepping out from behind Thane. I'll go. I'll leave this place. Go deeper into the wilderness where I can't trouble anyone. Just don't hurt him. No. Thane's voice was firm. We're not running from this. They'll kill you. Maybe, but I won't let you face this alone. He reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. I meant what I said about staying, about loving you. The gesture sent a murmur of horror. Through the crowd, several villagers stepped back, making warning signs with their hands. Look how she's corrupted him. Father Matthias cried. He touches her willingly, speaks of love to a demon. The contamination has spread too far. I am not a demon, Kira said quietly. but her voice carried across the garden with unusual resonance. "I am Nyreen. I tend this garden, preserve these. Texts harm no one." "Lies," the baker's wife again. "My cousin saw you walking through the forest, and the next day his crops failed. You bring curses wherever you go." "Your cousin's crops failed because he doesn't rotate his plantings," Thane said flatly. "Basic agricultural ignorance has nothing to do with Kira." The mob surged forward, and Kira felt something snap inside her chest. For 15 years, she had endured their hatred in silence, accepting it as the price of her existence. But now, they threatened the one person who had ever looked at her with love instead of fear. Enough. The word came out with such force that the very air seemed to ripple. The approaching villagers stumbled, their torches flickering as if in a sudden wind. The crystal windows of the temple began to glow with inner light, and the flowers in the garden turned their faces toward her, like sunflowers seeking dawn. "You call me demon," Kira said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the stones themselves vibrate. "You call me monster, curse-bringer, corruption. But I have done nothing but exist and love and tend beauty in a place you would see crumble to dust." Power flowed through her, not the destructive force her people had feared, but something generative and protective. The temple responded to her emotions, its ancient magics awakening after decades of dormancy. "You want to see what I truly am?" she asked, her scarred hands beginning to glow with silver light. "You want to see the power you've spent so long fearing?" "Kira," Thane said softly, squeezing her hand, "you don't have to prove anything to them." "Yes, I do." She looked at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I've spent my whole life hiding, accepting their hatred as justified. But you taught me something, Thane. You taught me that I am worthy of love. And if I'm worthy of love, then I'm worthy of respect." She turned back to the mob, her power building like a storm. "I am Kira of the Nyreen. I was exiled for compassion, banished for refusing to harden my heart. And I will not let you destroy the first happiness I have ever known." The light around her intensified, and for a moment the villagers saw her as Thane saw her, not as a monster, but as a woman of incredible strength and beauty, glowing with power that spoke of protection rather than destruction. Some of the mob began to back away, their certainty shaken. But Father Matthias raised his blessed iron staff, his face twisted with fanatic rage. "Demon's tricks," he cried. "She seeks to bewitch us all. Strike her down before she can corrupt the whole village." As the remaining villagers raised their weapons, Kira felt her power surge beyond anything she had ever experienced. The temple itself seemed to wake, its ancient stones singing with energy that made the air thick as honey. The final confrontation was about to begin. The confrontation erupted in a blaze of silver light and human fury. Father Matthias charged forward with his blessed iron staff, leading the remaining faithful in what they believed would be a righteous strike against evil. But as the weapon descended toward Kira, her power surged outward in a protective barrier that sent the attackers stumbling backward. "I will not let you harm him," she declared, her voice carrying harmonics that made the very stones of the temple sing in response. The crystal windows blazed with light, casting rainbow patterns across the garden as her emotions awakened forces that had slumbered for generations. But something unexpected happened. Instead of lashing out with destructive force, Kira's power manifested as something else entirely. Vines erupted from the earth, not to entangle or harm, but to create barriers between the attackers and their intended victims. Flowers bloomed in impossible profusion, filling the air with perfume that calmed rage and cleared minds clouded by fear. "Look!" cried a young man near the back of the mob, pointing at the transformed garden. "Look what she's doing." Where moments before there had been a peaceful but modest sanctuary, Now there was something that belonged in the old stories. A garden of wonder where every plant glowed with soft bioluminescence, where crystalline streams bubbled up from the earth to water beds of flowers that sang in harmony with the wind. "She's not destroying," whispered the baker's wife, her weapon lowering as she stared in amazement. "She's creating." "Demons' tricks," Father Matthias insisted, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Even he could see that whatever force flowed through Kira, it was nothing like the destructive malevolence he had preached against. Thane stepped forward, still holding Kira's hand, his own eyes wide with wonder at the transformation taking place. "Around them? This is what you were afraid of?" He called to the crowd. "This beauty? This power that heals rather than harms?" "The text spoke of this," Kira said, her voice filled with amazement as understanding dawned. The ancient bonding ceremonies, they weren't just about joining two souls. They were about awakening the power that comes from perfect harmony between hearts. The light around her intensified, but it was warm now, welcoming rather than threatening. Where it touched the villagers, their fear began to fade, replaced by something closer to awe. "You see her as I see her," Thane said, turning to address the crowd. "Not a monster, but a guardian. Not a curse, but a blessing. She could have struck you down. Her power is beyond anything you could imagine. Instead, she creates beauty. She protects. She loves." An elderly man near the front of the group, Thomas the Miller, slowly lowered his pitchfork. "The harvest," he said wonderingly. "Last month, when the blight came, it stopped at the edge of your garden. We thought it was coincidence, but ... But I was protecting what I could," Kira finished softly. "The same way I've always protected this place, even when you feared me for it." "My son," whispered another woman. "When he was lost in the forest last winter, he said he saw lights guiding him home. Blue lights, like starshine." Kira nodded slowly. "I couldn't bear to let a child freeze, even if his parents would hate me for the kindness." One by one, the weapons lowered. The mob that had come to destroy began to see the truth that Thane had recognized from the beginning, that the exile they had feared was not their enemy, but their protector. Father Matthias, isolated now in his hatred, raised his staff one final time. "You're all bewitched. She's clouded your minds with her devil's magic." But as he lunged forward, his blessed iron weapon met not Kira's flesh, but a barrier of pure light. The staff shattered against her protection, and the priest fell to his knees, his face a mask of confusion and defeat. "I bear you no ill will," Kira said gently, extending a hand toward him. "Your fear comes from ignorance, not malice. Let me show you what I truly am." When her fingers touched his forehead, Father Matthias gasped. For a moment, he saw through her eyes, felt the loneliness of 15 years in exile, the constant ache of being feared and hated for qualities that were, in truth, virtues. He experienced her gentleness, her protective instincts, her desperate desire to belong somewhere, to someone. "Forgive me," he whispered, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I was so wrong, so terribly wrong." The transformation was complete. Where once there had been a mob bent on destruction, now there stood a group of neighbors seeing clearly for the first time. Children who had been kept away from the temple ruins now pressed forward in wonder, their parents no longer afraid to. "Let them witness such beauty. Will you stay?" asked Thomas the Miller. "Will you help us understand? There's so much we could learn." Kira looked to Thane, who squeezed her hand encouragingly. "This is your choice," he said softly. "But whatever you decide, I'll be beside you." "I'll stay," she said, her voice carrying new confidence. "This has always been my home. I just never thought I'd be welcome in it." The celebration that followed lasted 3 days. The villagers brought food, flowers, and most importantly, their children the next generation who would grow up knowing that difference wasn't something to fear, but something to celebrate. The temple became a place of learning again, where humans and the occasional Nyrene traveler could study together in peace. On the final evening of celebration, as the last villagers made their way home by moonlight, Kira and Thane found themselves alone in their garden once more. But it was a different solitude, now not the isolation of exile, but the privacy of lovers who had found their place in the world. "Do you regret it?" Kira asked as they walked among the glowing flowers. "Giving up,"